Hello guys, Matthew here and welcome back again to the Tactic YouTube channel. Although we all thought that the recently released Nvidia's GeForce GTX 1080 Ti would probably be the last GPU for this generation, representing the next step from the regular GeForce GTX 1080 and which brings in a serious performance bump as you'll see later on, they've actually surprised us with Titan XP announcement, but despite of it, I'm still sticking with the GeForce GTX 1080 Ti series as aftermarket versions of it are finally popping out, one of which is the MSI's Gaming X version in front of me. Of course, with it carrying that series name, you can expect all the bells and whistles which we usually see when it comes to Gaming X lineup, with the bundle being a tad more generous than usual, where you will beside your user manuals, optical disc with drivers and software, and a thank you note, also get this 6-pin to 8-pin PCI Express power adapter. And here's the graphics card itself. Aesthetics-wise, the design of the graphics card from the outside on first glance seemed to be completely the same as seen on their other GPU series, which also carry the 6th generation of Gaming X series and twin Frozer cooler design. We have your recognizable black and red plastic top shroud with red LEDs on the back, glowing MSI RGB LED Dragon logo on the side, and a GeForce GTX naming next to it, which is a new add-on for this series. Usually you don't see that on an aftermarket cooler, and as I saw, all other aftermarket GeForce GTX 1080 Ti's also have it, so I would guess Nvidia put their fingers on it and in some way made board partners to do so. Hidden beneath that outer shell we have a custom matte black PCB accompanied by this pretty beefy aluminum heatsink. As you can probably notice, it's really thick and long, more than we usually encounter on their other Gaming X models, even the higher end ones, so the card is a bit taller than your classical dual slot design, while the total length of the card is around 290mm. That heatsink is almost completely covering the length of the graphics card from front to back, and it's intertwined with 6 heat pipes, making direct contact with components in few places, particularly the GPU and VRMs, which are part of 8+2 power design and made out of their military class components. MSI also doubled up metal plates with this model, so beside the expected backplate on the bottom side, with its usual Dragon graphics, textured finish and details in the form of these cutouts, we also have a plate which surrounds the GPU from the top side, sandwiched between the heatsink and the PCB, and which directly goes onto the GDDR5X video memory, additionally taking the heat off of it, while it also bumps up the sturdiness of the card as it hooks up to the IO shield on the front. Topping it off, we have a pair of MSI's 100mm Torx 2.0 fans, which are bringing in the cool air on the aforementioned components. For powering up this beast of a card, we have two 8-pin PCI Express power connectors on the back end, while on the front, beside the two SLI bridge connections, you'll also find a pretty common array of video outputs, 3 display ports, 1 HDMI and 1 DVI-D. Finally, it's time to take this monster out for a spin. Compared to the regular GeForce GTX 1080, the Ti version has a whopping 1024 shaders, or 40% more of them. That's a total of 3584. But with that, Nvidia also lowered down its base core clock speed for around 150 MHz, at least in this case of MSI's gaming mode profile. All of this sounds like a significant decrease thanks to Nvidia's GPU Boost 3.0 technology. In practice, the average achieved core clock actually wasn't any different compared to my review of MSI's GeForce GTX 1080 Gaming X model, roaming around just above the 1900 MHz mark when using MSI's OC mode profile, with which I did all of my testing. That, coupled with other upgrades like the fact that we have 11 GB of GDDR5X video memory, wider 352-bit memory interface, and 1000 MHz faster effective video memory clock than compared to GeForce GTX 1080, it catapults the GeForce GTX 1080 Ti up high in terms of the performance, even just in theory. Looking at the benchmarking results, you can right away confirm that it truly is like that. The GeForce GTX 1080 Ti goes through everything without breaking a sweat. I've skipped testing it out in 1080p as after all this is a no-compromise graphics card that without a problem outputs high frame rates for 1440p 21:9 or 16:9 resolutions, as you can see it here. Plus, I highly doubt that someone will buy it for playing at 1080p, while 4K shouldn't be a problem either, especially with this amount of video memory and raw horsepower. As you probably noticed in the graphs, incorporating some manual overclocking into the formula, you can easily squeeze out a frame or two more, and in the case of this particular sample, I managed to go over the 2000 MHz threshold for the GPU, anywhere from 20 to 50 MHz extra on top of it, depending on the game and thermals, while memory was clocking at around 1520 MHz, or just above the 12 GHz mark effectively. On account of the higher CUDA core number, the overall TDP also goes up, although the GPU temperature itself isn't any different compared to the GeForce GTX 1080 or other lower tier models, even with a very similar fan speed at full load, but then again you have to count in the fact that it has a bigger and more capable cooler than them. The heat which this GPU and its surrounding components produce is pretty significant, and you can actually feel the sheer warmth which comes off of it. Still, despite of that, the GPU was mostly around 70 degrees Celsius mark in games and under Fermax stress test. As it's a 40% jump in shaders number, it's no wonder that the amount of heat is more noticeable, and you can also come to that conclusion based on the fact that on an open test bed it was struggling at idle to keep the temperature below the threshold of turning the fans on. It roamed anywhere from 55 to 62 degrees Celsius, the upper number being the threshold limit for the fans to turn on, which again lowered down the temperature of the GPU and which again led to fans turning off, and basically it was a loop cycle repeating every minute or so, as you can see it here from this GPU Z screenshot. So overall, MSI's zero frozer feature was toggling the fans on and off, while I assume in a chassis it could be even harder to keep them off unless you have a really well ventilated one. Noise which the fans make is still considered almost whisper quiet, even though they spin anywhere from 1200 to 1300 RPM, but they actually aren't the most audible sound making parts. The coil whine, at least in this sample, was pretty noticeable on an open test bed, basically throughout the whole range of games, and particularly in synthetic benchmarks like 3D Mark, which is known for bringing out the worst out of graphics cards when it comes to coil whine. Lastly, with now pretty established and recognized MSI gaming app, you can control your preloaded core clock profiles, drag an eye recording feature, on-screen display information for the graphics card, turn on or off MSI zero frozer feature, and so on, and of course fiddle with settings for the LEDs on the graphics card, change different effects and colors. Just have in mind that only the logo on the side is lit with RGB LEDs. All in all, this is one really fast and capable graphics card series, ready to take on any challenge you throw at it for at least next 2 years. Yes, it's pricey, but you also need to have in mind that you are getting 20 to 30% performance gain at basically the same price tag which was up until now reserved for the regular GeForce GTX 1080 series. That's it guys for this time from me. Thank you once again for watching. Feel free to toss me a thumbs up if you like what you saw, that really helps me a lot. Leave a comment down below if you have any questions about this product or if you want to leave your suggestions, and of course feel free to subscribe for content further down the line, or you can just check out some of my other videos from before. Until then, catch you later guys.